Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for this Azkara. As we approach the first Yahrzeit of our dear Mashgiach, our beloved Rabbi Sharfman Zatzal, we'd like to begin the program with a kapitel Tillim. I would like to ask Mr. Chaim Sharfman to lead us in that kapitel Kuf Lamed. Chaim.
Shira ma'alois b'mamakim kirosicha Adonai. Adonai shema b'koili tiyeno aznecha kashvois t'kol tachanunoi. Im avoinois tishmor ya Adonai miyamoi. Ki imcha aslicha leman tivorei. Ki visi Adonai kivsa nafshi v'ledvaroi oichalti. Nafshi l'Adonai mishoymerim l'boiker, shoymerim l'boiker. Yachel Yisrael al Adonai, Kim Adonai Chesed v'arbei moifedus. V'hu yiftes Yisrael mikol avonosav.
Before we call up our first speaker this evening, the family asked that it be mentioned that although the actual Yahrzeit falls out on, I believe, Yud Beis Nisan, that's per the Yud Aleph Nisan, Yud Aleph Nisan, but as per the psak they received, the Azkara may not take place within 30 days of the Chag HaPesach. Thus, the Azkara was scheduled for tonight, taking into account all of the many conflicts the Olam HaTorah is experiencing in February from the many Mosdas HaTorah here in Miami. It should be noted, and I believe this to be a great source of strength and nechama to the family, that the core hashkafa that Rabbi Sharfman Zatzal taught in keeping to the dikduke halacha, his very essence, that he prided himself in his own learning, his own steiging, and his teaching, is being realized tonight through this Azkara on this date by being makdish the upcoming Simchas HaChag. And Be'ezus Hashem, during the upcoming month of Adar Nisan and going into the Chag HaPesach, we in fact will be realizing the essence of Rabbi Sharfman. May his neshama continue to have an aliyah, and may we all be strengthened and moved by the teachings of his entire life. At this time, it's my kavod gadol to call upon our Rashiva, Rabbi Yisrael Naiman.
Baruch Dovid Aryeh, Zatzal, Ben Rav Nachman, Ben Rav Nosson Dov, Yibadol Chaim Tovim, Reb Dovi, as we affectionately called him, I would say was a walking Musar Shmuz. A walking Musar Shmuz is someone who you can watch and learn, glean from his actions, glean from his hanhaga, from his way of life, how one should act, al pi das Torah, al pi hilchas Musar, al pi hilchas Mishnah Berurah. He was a walking Musar Shmuz. I would like to focus primarily on, being that he was part of the yeshiva, he had such a tremendous relationship with, you might even say, doros of Talmidim, over 20 years, to focus on his relationship with Talmidim. The pasuk in this week's parsha is with Tzipiso Sozav Tor. There was an instruction to build the Aron for the Beis Hamikdash, for the Mishkan. And it says that you cover it with Zav Tahar, Mibayis u'Michutz, outside and inside. Rashi explains there were 3 different boxes. The outside and inside were Zav, the middle one was not Zav. And Das Genim explains, and he says, Roy Haya Ha'aron, Riyos Zav Kulo. It was appropriate that the entire Aron should have been Zahav. Kulo, Mibayis u'Michutz, outside, middle, and inside. All 3 layers, all 3 boxes. But it wasn't. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said no. Only the outside and the inside. Why is that? Because it was Nisa Bakosef, was carried by the human beings, by the Kohanim. Yachbid Yoser Midai. It would be too heavy. It would be a little too much strain for the Kohanim. And the Torah was chas on the efforts they put in. If you think about it, there's a mitzvah of Zekeli and Vavehu, as the Das Kenim obviously means, it was appropriate, truly appropriate, to make sure to build the Aron, which is the epitome, the highest level of Kedusha, what the Mishkan stands for. It's appropriate to build it, Kulo Zahav. And Mistam the Kohen, if you would ask the Kohanim, do you mind, Kohanim, if we make it a little bit heavier? It'll be harder for you. But Lamais will be so much more beauty for the Mishkan, so much more beauty to represent the Aron, which symbolizes our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Would you mind? I think we have a right to assume they wouldn't mind. Pasha, they would say, yes, please, to Machabed the Aron, to Machabed HaKadosh Baruch Hu a little more. No question about it. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaches us it's not appropriate. Everything has to be done with a balance, recognizing, weighing both sides of the coin. Mitzad Echad, in this case, it was the chashivas, the beauty of the Aron, Zekel and Maveil, Mitzad Hasheni, the Kohen, the Tirch of the Kohanim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Pastan, we have to be careful, Chasan Kvodan, Chasan the Tirch of the Kohanim. Reb Dovi had a tremendous love for Talmidim, each and every Talmud. But if you think about it, what does that mean? That means you have a Talmud, you try to help the Talmud. You have a tremendous desire. You want to do whatever is best for the Talmud. But in the real world, you can't always do what's best for one Talmud, because whatever you do for one Talmud affects numerous people. It affects the Talmud's chavrusa. It affects his roommate. It affects the shir. It affects the rest of the yeshiva. I would like to ignore what the Talmud did last week, but I can't, because what about other Talmidim? What about the effect, the hashpah, that it'll have on someone else? So what do? You have to weigh one against the other. Now, if someone doesn't care for his Talmud so much, okay, it's not such a big deal. So I'm not going to take care of this Talmud, but I have a whole yeshiva to worry about. Dovi was not like that. He had this challenge because he loved the Talmidim so much. He wanted what's best for his Talmud. But I know personally from many, many times, he was so careful. He cared for one Talmud, but cared for every single Talmud. And if one Talmud was in trouble, he took care of it, but not at the expense of someone else. And there was that weight, that delicate, he had that ability, that insight, that das Torah to figure out, what do we do? What proper balance do we take? To watch it, the way he conducted himself was a walking Musar Shmuz. And furthermore, many times you have a Talmud who gives you a hard time, makes your job very tough. Maybe chutzpah, maybe even appropriate behavior. And a regular person would go ahead and feel don't feel like helping him out so much. I'm not so inclined to bend over backwards for this Talmud who's not being so nice to me, not taking care of my covet, not even acting in an appropriate way, which is befitting a basic Talmud Chacham, a basic Ben Torah in Yeshiva. What do I do? What do I do? So you watch Duvi, you can figure it out. Chazal tell us in this week's parsha, and last week's parsha, Kisira Chamor Sonacha, you find, if you come up to and you meet the donkey of your enemy, your sonay, you have to help him out. Azov Tazov Imo. And the Gemara Pesachim explains to us, according to some pshat in the Gemara, it was mutter l'sanoso, you're allowed to hate him. And in fact, according to one pshat, it was mitzvah l'sanoso. It's a mitzvah to hate this person. He did something terrible, despicable, inappropriate. And it's a mitzvah to hate him. Nevertheless, you go ahead and do the chesed, azov tazov imo. And the Mefarshim wonder, why the lashon of azov tazov? Why does it say azov? Azov usually means to take leave of him, to not care of him. It should have said azor, azor also, help him, something like that. But why azov tazov? So the famous Targum Yonasan Uziel says, he says, you know what azov tazov means? It means mishpok tishpok behi shaisa. At that time you should take leave. You should leave go. Yasana de blibeich eluya. You have a certain hatred, you have a certain negativity, which is appropriate, which is right overall, you should hate him. But the pasuk is telling you, azov tazov, remove it from your heart temporarily. Now that itself is unreal. How can a person do that? I'm supposed to hate him. I do hate him. The Torah says, commands me to hate him. Mitzvah l'sno also. It's a mitzvah to hate him, according to one pshat in the Gemara. But that's overall. But when it comes now, I have to do chesed for him. Hashem says, I give you the koach. We obviously are given the koach to do that, to take away, to stop for a moment that hate, that negative feeling. In the chinuch business, as I mentioned, as I indicated, we all have this challenge. There are talmidim at times, it's not a chiddush, I think I can say in our crowd, it's not a chiddush that some talmidim tend to frustrate us and tend to get on our nerves, rightfully so. Not rightfully from their side, from our perspective. And they can do something inappropriate, maybe in something which is mitzvah l'sno or so. And the challenge that Rabbeim and Meramdim, Mechanchim have is to azov tazov, to take a leave. Stop that. Take care of your Talmud. He needs your help. He needs your chesed. He needs your kindness. He needs your concern. He needs your time and effort and energies. Duvi was a pro at that. There was never once when I saw that he said he felt that he acted in a way which he felt he couldn't handle. He couldn't work with the Talmud because the Talmud was inappropriate. And there were plenty of times that the Talmud was inappropriate. But Duvi was a pro. He was able to not just weigh both sides of the coin and figure out what to do, but do it in spite of the fact that he's not behaving properly. And maybe I feel reserved about helping him out. Believe me, it's not an easy thing to do. Rabbi Duvi was a walking Musar Shmuz. His love for Talmidim was exceptional. The bond he created was tremendous. It brings to mind Reb Simcha Wasserman one time was walking in his yeshiva, showing around the visiting professor from a nearby college. And after a while, the professor says to Reb Simcha, he says, Rabbi Simcha, please explain to me. You and I are very similar. We both teachers. We both have students. We both have Talmidim who yearn to learn from us. They take notes. We mark their tests, and they're very close to us. What is the difference between you and me? We're the same business. Tell me a difference. Show me a difference. Reb Simcha says, let me ask you a question. Reb Simcha says, how many of your students that have left your school have invited you to their wedding? How many of your students have invited you to their wedding? He thinks for a moment. He says, maybe 4 or 5, less than 5. Reb Simcha says, in my business, my Talmud would never think of making a wedding without my presence. And if I couldn't come, he would almost complain bitterly, how can I have a chasna, how can I have my wedding without my Rebbe there? Both said this was Rabbi Dovid. Rabbi Dovid Sharfman was someone who had such a shaykhus and relationship to his Talmidim. They wouldn't consider doing anything. Forget about a chasna. They wouldn't make a step without calling up, Rebbe, I need your eitzah, I need your advice, I need your guidance. Please share with me, what should I do? And it goes without saying when it comes to a chasna, Of course, he has to be there. He was a part and parcel of their life. And of course, there was the Mesiras Nefesh, his constant 24/7, I like to call it 25/8. His involvement with his Talmidim, with the yeshiva, was always there. Whether it was the middle of the night, when he had a bacher call him from, he just got off of the plane at 3 o'clock in the morning because the plane was delayed and he needs to ride home, he doesn't know what to do. Dovi went to the airport, no shilas, no second thoughts about it. That's his love, that's his concern for every Talmud. And you think it's Mesiras Nefesh. But honestly, I don't think it was Mesiras Nefesh. Let me explain to you why. There's a famous medrash, Rav Shiva Zatzal always quoted. Rabbi Yochanan was being mitayel, I think it's from Tzipori to Tiberia, with his Talmud Reb Chia. And they were walking along the path, and they passed numerous a vineyard first. And Rabbi Yochanan says to a Talmud, my dear Talmud, this field was mine, this vineyard was mine at one time, and I sold it. Why'd you sell it? I sold it to learn Torah, to support myself to learn Torah. And he walks further down the road, he comes across an orchard. And the same dialogue goes on. It was mine, I sold it to learn Torah. Another field. After a couple of these situations, Rabbi Chia breaks down and starts crying. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Chia, why are you crying, my Talmud? What are you crying for? What's going on? So Rabbi Chia says, I'm crying because what are you going to do for your old age? You sold all your property. What are you going to do? So Rabbi Yochanan answers him. He says, is it not chashuv in your eyes? Is it not a beautiful deal that I sold something which was created in 7 days, in 6 days? The world, properties, was created in 6 days. And I sold it for something which took 40 days to create. That was his answer. And the Rosh Yeshiva asked, what was Rabbi Chia thinking? Rabbi Chia knew he was a Talmud Chacham, was one of the Gdolei Ador. He realized the value of Torah. What's his question? And Rosh Yeshiva explained his question was very simply, I understand it was a good deal. The deal was appropriate, but Lamais, it's going to be hard for you. What are you going to do? It's going to be hard for you. How are you going to be sober that? I feel sorry that you'll go through so much hardship with no properties, no assets. What was Rabbi Yochanan's answer? Rabbi Yochanan says to him, he says, can you imagine if I owned something, a house in Miami, maybe it's worth $250,000, $500,000, $1 million, and I got a great deal, a great barter, a great deal, and I sold to someone, I got in return a house on Fifth Avenue in New York, an apartment, the Empire State Building schmooze, right? I got a multi-billion-dollar building for that house I owned in Miami. I lost the house, I lived there for 30, 40 years. Do you think I would feel that pain at all? A dakas of pain, a dakas of hardship? If I saw how much I was getting, $1 billion deal for a couple $100,000 house I gave up, it wasn't hard. For Rabbi Dovid, when he understood, because he understood the beauty, the chashivas, the gadlus, the value of Torah, the value of a Talmud, the value of teaching a Talmud Torah, there was nothing to compare. It wasn't Mesiras Nefesh Rabosai. It wasn't Mesiras Nefesh. It looked like Mesiras Nefesh. For us, it's Mesiras Nefesh. I think that, my humble opinion, is what Rabbi Dovid was about. That hakara, the recognition, the appreciation of the gadlus and the chashivas and the value of Torah. He was buying Empire State Buildings every day and giving up some sleep, some comfort, maybe some family time. Not Mesiras Nefesh. Just want to end with a little anecdote which may be a little nechama for the family. There was a gadol who was visiting America from Eretz Yisrael, and it was hosted by a comfortable American family. He's there for Shabbos. Comes before Shabbos, right? After Kiddush, beginning of Shabbos, then Balabas says to the gadol, he says, Rebbe, just maybe share with me some eitzah. My children aren't going the proper derech. They're veering off. They're not being machshav Torah. I expect them to be. Like I would like to teach them to be. Give me an eitzah. The gadol was quiet. He must think about it. That night at the meal at the Suda Shabbos, so one of the young 8-year-old boy mistakenly turns the light on Shabbos, flicks the switch, and turns it on. The father's reaction, calm, Ruvain, we don't do that. It's Shabbos. It's inappropriate. Please be very careful next time. Comes Mosai Shabbos, after beautiful Shabbos, and something else happened. The boy, that 8-year-old son, is playing with the father's medallions, his gold, silver medallions he won in different contests, whatever it was. He was playing with those very special, cherished medallions. The father sees him in the action of doing it, and he starts yelling. You can hear him a mile away. "What are you touching my medallions? Don't you dare touch it again." A mile away, you can hear his voice. That Gadol told the father, "I understand why your children are growing up not the way you expect. Because they see your reaction. How do you respond to different things? They see your value system. They see your value system. They see that when it comes to Torah mitzvahs, you guide them, you direct them, but very calm voice, and you don't get excited. It doesn't mean we're supposed to get excited, but the contrast." He says, he spoke to them so calmly, firmly, but calmly. As if it's important, but when it came to the medallions, whoa, a tornado, a hurricane of abuse and yelling and screaming. He says, we have to teach our Talmidim, our children, by means of how we conduct ourselves, how we respond to different situations. What is our value system? Rabbi Dovid was the ultimate role model, especially to his family. He taught them 24/7. What does it mean to lead a Torah-dik life as a Ben Torah, as a Talmud Chacham, as a Yorei Shamayim, as a Baal Musar? What does it mean? And that is what makes all the difference in the world, and will be tremendous hashpah, and those memories and those visions, those pictures which the family has, and which we Talmidim and which we Chaverim have in our minds, will be a tremendous hashpah misham on all of us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us. We should learn from his ways. We should always see him as a role model. Yehi Zechro Baruch.
I would like to call up now Rav Asa Minkowitz, who's not only has the perspective of knowing Rabbi Sharfman as a chaver, but also as a colleague. Rabbi Minkowitz is one of the esteemed members of the Hanhala and the Beis Medrash Chavetz Chaim in Queens. Welcome to Miami, and thank you very much.
Good evening. Many, if not most of those who are here tonight, have a perspective from seeing and knowing Rabbi Sharfman Zatzal in a role of serving Klal Yisrael unswervingly as an Eved Neman for over 20 years. I come with a different perspective. My perspective is of a chaver, whom we lovingly call Dovi. We were in yeshiva in Forest Hills in our young, carefree years. We learned together, we laughed together, and we grew together. Your perspective is of an individual, a giant of an individual, driven with unbounded energy. I've heard so much from former Talmidim about this giant of a man. And as I speak with them, I realize that they are not former Talmidim. Even though much time has passed since their time in Miami, they speak of him as if they're in the moment, experiencing his love and his care. The excitement and the glow in their faces as they talk about him is amazing to watch. Talmidim speak of how Rabbi Sharfman Zatzal took care of their needs, from the greatest to the most mundane. His time was theirs from the moment a Talmud landed at the airport. He picked him up, he hugged him, he took him to Mincha, and he made sure he had a blanket. Nothing deterred him from assisting his Talmidim in their growth, even if it meant passing out chocolates in the Beis Medrash to those who came to time on Seder. Nothing was beneath him if it helped to guide and develop a Talmud. As one Talmud said to me, he wasn't concerned about image or really even what's best for the yeshiva. His achrayus was to do what was best for each individual. A Talmud related that he wasn't afraid to push them very bluntly to man up and grow up, as he said it, challenging Talmidim who complained about negative hashpah from others as a reason for their complacency in learning. He would say, take the Sharfman challenge. Take a walk and ask yourself, is it your friend or is it really you? One Talmud told me that he made such an impression on him that he remembers, as his head was down dozing in the Beis Medrash, he heard Rabbi Sharfman's voice, your head down in a Makom Kadosh. And then he lifted up his head and he saw that no one was around. He realized he had just imagined Rabbi Sharfman talking. Another Talmud said that his Yomim Noroim were forever changed, even though all Rabbi Sharfman really said was that Yom Kippur is a chance to start fresh and make it right. But the hergish and the feeling, when he said it, opened this Talmud's eyes and changed his Yom Noroim forever. The hours of time he spent with Talmidim in the yeshiva or in his home, together with his Eishes Chayil, Tibad L'Chaim, who Talmidim have said it was one mission, together, to help the Talmidim. The amount of emotional energy he invested b'leiv v'nefesh, and anybody who knew him knew the leiv, the passion in everything that he did. That takes a lot of emotional energy. The shiurim in the yeshiva, the hours he learned, the Sunday morning shiurim. And to top it all off, all this was done under the most difficult of physical constraints and pain without showing it. So I asked myself, was he superhuman? And then I look at Rabbi Dovid Zatzal from my perspective of his earlier years, and I'm baffled. True, he was a big lamdin. He was a masmid. He was a real pikeach who showed care and concern for others. He was passionate, and even then he ranted about emes. The seeds of greatness were there, but we didn't see a superhero. So how did he do it? How did he actualize that potential and do what seems impossible? Tonight, I would like to focus briefly on 2 points, which I think are the key to understand how he accomplished what he did. The Medrash in Parshas Yisro relates a pasuk in Mishlei. Im arafta l'reyecha, takata lezar kapecha, nokashta b'imrei picha. If you guaranteed a loan to a stranger, and he is unable to pay, your words have entrapped you, and you're stuck. And you must resort to any means to pay off the loan. But Chazal darshan this pasuk referring to a Talmud Chacham. As long as the Talmud Chacham doesn't take a position of leadership, he isn't held responsible for others. But once he is notel hatalis, once he takes the mantle of leadership, he is now in a different league of responsibility. Imaravta l'reyecha, if you have become a leader, you're now a guarantor for your people. And if they err, you are responsible. And the Medrash continues, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ani va'ata bezira, o nitzachti, o nitzachta. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says himself to that Arev, now that you've taken on the achrayas as a leader, you're a guarantor, you now have to answer to me if they fail. It is as if you and I are in a ring. Either you win or you lose. And the Medrash asks, so how is one expected to succeed with such awesome responsibility? The Medrash says, Leich v'israpes ba'avak ragleim shel gdolim imcha. Go and do whatever it takes to be able to carry out your responsibility, even if it means you must wallow in the dirt, something beneath your dignity. There's no room for gaiva. Your life is at stake. I think Rabbi Sharfman, Zatzal, who was imbued with the Midas HaEmes, understood that taking the mantle of leadership requires total self-sacrifice. We must answer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly. And therefore, he took everything that he learned in his years in yeshiva, and all his kochos, and the favorite hobbies of his youth, his likes, and even his rants, and used them all directed for one singular purpose, to serve those who he was achroi for. That emes propelled him to stretch himself way beyond his years in yeshiva. And nothing was beneath his dignity if it would enable a Talmud to learn and grow. But the question still bothered me. Granted that he was motivated to push and outperform because of that sense of achrayas, but how was it practically, physically possible to juggle so much, especially in his condition? How do you fit 72 hours of work into 24? In Avad, given 6 months before he left this world, I think Rabbi Dovid Zatzal addressed this question. He was talking to new Talmidim who came to the yeshiva and were concerned whether they would see success. And he said, I quote, a lot of things that you can't do, but if you put your mind to it, if you think you can't do them, if you put your mind to it, Habolet taher misayin lo min hashamayim. If a person tries, Hashem helps us. But it is how you frame it and set it up in your mind that makes the difference. And then he quoted a Rabbeinu Bachai to explain this. When Yaakov Avinu worked another 7 years for Rachel, the pasuk tells us, "V'hayu be'einav kiyamim achodim." In his eyes, it was only like a few days. And all the Mefarshim are bothered. What does that mean? The opposite is true. If you really want something, then it should seem like forever. And Rabbeinu Bachai explains that Yaakov Avinu was not referring to the time. Rather, he was referring to the workload. After all, 14 years of work is a lot of work. So he used the tachbula to lessen the workload in his eyes. He didn't attach a number to it, which would have made it overwhelming. Yaakov decided he's not going to look at it that way. It's not 7 years. I'm not counting. I can work a day. If I have to work another day, I'll work another day. This was a tachbula to make peace with his situation and carry it one day at a time. Imagine, even Yaakov Avinu could have been overwhelmed and needed this tachbula. As Rabbi Sharfman then said, there is no one who can say, I can't do it. The difference, whether a person makes it or not, is his frame of mind. The way to do it is to focus on the positive, one day at a time. And Habol Tahir, why shouldn't I get Siyata Dishmaya? So many other people got it and succeeded. Though we may not have realized it then, Rabbi Sharfman was using this tachbula for years. He wasn't overwhelmed or distracted by the great task before him. He focused on each Talmud, each situation, each day. And he saw the Siyata Dishmaya and believed Be'emunah Shleima that he would receive it. In that way, he was able to make the impossible possible. Rabbi Sharfman's life calls out to us in his inimitable way. I did it, you can also do it. If we can but learn from his tremendous sense of achrayus, which translated into an unstoppable drive, taking it one day at a time, all while being encouraged by the tremendous siyata dishmaya that we will receive, we could change our lives and the lives of those around us. And this would be a great schus for him to continue his legacy. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
I would like to acknowledge many members of the Sharfman and Kamen family that are here tonight for this Azkara. We'd like to call upon Rabbi Sharfman's eldest son, Yaakov Sharfman, to address us.
Over the past number of months, I kept a note card in my pocket and tried to write down every time I wanted to talk to my father and the various different memories that came to me. There were numerous times a day that different things I encountered or did reminded me of him. Many times a day, I yearned to call him, to get his opinion on something, to let him know how I was progressing, or to just hear his reassuring voice. As time passed and I took note of the various things that reminded me of him, I got a deeper understanding of what my father meant to me. I realized that I hadn't only torn Kriya for my father. I tore Kriya for my father, my Rebbe, and my Rav. The memory that most symbolizes my relationship with my father was my Shabbos morning walk to yeshiva with him up the canal, a 15-minute walk. Many Shabbosim since the yeshiva moved to this building, I would walk to and from davening with my father. In the earlier years, our conversations revolved around the Yankees and other trivial things going on in my life as an elementary-aged boy. As time progressed and I got older, the conversation matured with me. Eventually, the conversations became more about ruchnius. We discussed the different sugyas I was learning in yeshiva, concepts in Musar, and different hashkafic topics. That was my father, always there by my side, allowing me to grow at my own pace, guiding and teaching me. My father tried very hard to guide us in the right direction and give us the tools to make the right decisions without telling us what to do. I remember one year in middle school, we were by one of my aunts in Brooklyn for part of Pesach. My father thought that it would be a good idea for a boy my age to spend some time learning over Yantif, but wanted me to do it happily. My father asked me if I would be interested in helping him prepare for his shir that he had to give after Yantif. Understandably flattered, I immediately agreed. To this day, I remember exactly where we sat in the Nevardik Shul on Avenue N as I helped my father prepare Perek HaMeniach for the Newsman. Another way of accomplishing this was by leading by example. A number of years ago, my father decided to go through Nach. Amazingly, he found the time to do this during carpool. When we were waiting in front of someone's house or at a red light, my father would open up the sefer and chop in a pasuk here and a pasuk there. My father lived what he believed. And there are similar stories about other inyanim. However, there were times that my father thought that a certain thing was the right thing to do, and he thought that it was the proper chinuch for us to do them. At times like that, my father helped us through it. My older sisters remember when they were younger, there was a certain person sitting Shiva that my father thought they should go be Menachem Avel. Being that they were little kids and not so close with the Avel, they were uncomfortable. But my father thought it was the right thing. So he took them by the hand and helped them through it. My sister said that it made a lasting impact on them, that sometimes you have to do what's right, even if it's hard. Another way of accomplishing this was by making the learning exciting. My father would make different contests or incentives to get us involved. We remember as kids, my father offering us black and white cookies for memorizing the Svarim and Ksuvim or the Shisha Sidra Mishnah. He tried to get us to think and challenged us with questions about the Parshios and Yom Tovim. He also had a tremendous knowledge of Jewish history. I vividly remember many drives up to Orlando when I was sitting in the back row trying to listen in to the interesting conversations my father was having about different topics. Last year on Shabbos Chanukah, we had a student from an Ivy League college over. At the end of Shabbos, he turned to my father and asked him if he was a history major. My father also built us up, teaching us to feel good about ourselves and our accomplishments. When my younger brother Avram Mordechai made a siyum on a Masechta of Mishnayos, my mother prepared a steak dinner for him and my father. If he heard positive feedback from a Rebbe about my progress, he would glowingly tell me. I remember right before I went for pictures, the night of my chasana, my father gave me a whole speech about how proud he was of me and how all I'd given him was nachas, always trying to build us up. But our relationship went beyond the typical father-son relationship. My father was also my Rebbe. Although I was close with various other Rebbeim throughout my years in yeshiva, my father was the one I could turn to for the final decision. I talked to my father about everything. Whether I needed advice on how to overcome a personal challenge or how to deal with someone, it was my father I turned to. When I needed chizuk, again, it was my father. And I turned to him for the small things as well. For an idea of what to learn bein hazmanim, when I needed a chazal for a speech, or which chavrusa to learn with the next man. My father always had the right advice for me. The other day I had to make a decision about something, and I kept thinking that I wish I could get my father's opinion on the matter. It was a stark reminder of how involved my father was in my life. He was also the person we shared our accomplishments with. When I was learning well or making progress in something, I would pick up the phone and tell him. It would make him so happy. A Talmud recently told me that when my father saw a certain accomplishment of his, he cried from joy. This year, there were times that I wanted to share my successes with him. I wanted to share my joy and satisfaction. Although I couldn't physically discuss it with him, it occurred to me that by serving as a Melitz Yosher for my success, my father played an even more important role in my achievements. Throughout the year, I recalled so many conversations we had in so many places. Every time I get off the Jackie Robinson Parkway by East New York, I recall what we talked about the last time we were there together. There were so many things about my father that made me and countless other Talmidim comfortable opening up to him. First and foremost was the tremendous love he felt for us, and it was felt by us all. Recently, a Talmud emailed me that the reason he loved my father so much was because of the tremendous love my father had for him. K'mayim panim al panim. With that kind of love, it was only natural to feel comfortable opening up to him. You knew he would be understanding and respect your desire to improve yourself. My father was very good at relating to others. When I would discuss a challenge with my father, he was able to see it from my perspective, to realize how hard it felt from my point of view. But with his signature sense of humor, he was able to provide the proper frame of reference with which to view it. You would walk into his office feeling down and walk out feeling uplifted. My father was also great at being a mechazik a person. He was able to build up the chashivas of being a ben yeshiva so much that you couldn't not feel good about what you were doing. He would often say that the Yetzer Hara has a field day in yeshivas. He comes to guys who spend their days learning and convinces them that what they're doing isn't chashiv, that the next guy is doing better than them. But you have to realize that it's just the Yetzer Hara, and what you are doing is so chashiv. He had a way of reassuring you and instilling you with a certain confidence. Because the well-being of others was his priority, I was not surprised to see how he handled himself in the weeks before his patira. One of his recent Talmidim told me that he called my father a few days before my chasana, when my father already wasn't doing so well. When my father answered, the Talmud realized that my father didn't sound so good and told my father that it was okay, they could talk a different time. But my father insisted. And it was the same with me. Not realizing quite how unwell my father was feeling, in the weeks leading up to my chasana, I was constantly trying to reach him to discuss different things. One time I called shortly after he finished a treatment about something not so important, and he told me that he was unable to talk. But a short while later, after he regained some strength, he called back. As soon as he had the strength, he was happy to talk. I remember a different conversation I had that week, which was the type of conversation that could have ended quickly. But he felt that it was important to talk it out. Finally, our father was our Rav. We called him with all different shilas that we had. Not a week goes by without one of us getting the urge to call my father to get a quick psak halacha. The index card that I carry around in my pocket are a constant reminder of how tangible this loss is to us all. Nafshenu kishura benafsho. Our hearts are interwoven in such a way that in all circumstances, the loss is deeply felt. As a child, I miss the warmth and encouragement that my father always provided. As a Talmud, I miss the learning and guidance that was infused with such love. And whenever a shaila comes up, we mourn the loss of our Rav. It has been close to 11 months since our father has passed away. On a daily basis, we are reminded of how lucky we were to have had a father like this. The chinuch, lessons, and love that he imbued within us remain strong. Although the void in our hearts will never be filled, we strive to emulate his ways and impart his messages onto the next generation. Doing this is part of the nechama and enables us to keep him in our everyday lives. Yehi zichro baruch.
Thank you, Yaakov. It's now our kavod gadol to hear from Rabbi Sharfman's youngest son, Avram Mordechai Sharfman. Who's a regular speaker here.
This past week was a very special week in Torah Semes. It was my Azkara Gemara. I know that my father joined us at this special event and was watching us from Shemayim. When I made a Siyam last year, I remember my father singing and dancing with me to celebrate. I am sure he would have done the same this week. I remember all the special ways my father showed us how much he loved us and how to act like a true Ben Torah. He always bought us our favorite nash for camp, and even though he didn't know who my bunkmates would be, he bought us extra so that I could share with everyone. Each year before Purim, my father would buy the coolest groggers, cap guns, poppers, and noisemakers. I had so many choices I was able to switch off what I used for so many Hamans. Not only did I feel my Abba's love so strongly, He showed me how much he loved each mitzvah of the Torah. He wanted me to have that same love of mitzvos. Last year, Purim was on Sunday, so we brought our supply of noisemakers to yeshiva before Shabbos. I walked with my father to yeshiva to daven mincha and ma'ariv and be there for Megillah. Like so many other times, when I walked with my father, we just schmoozed about regular life. He also discussed the halachos of Purim with me. I now realize that was the last walk I went on with my father. I miss Abba so much each day. I hope that I can follow in his footsteps and grow up to be a Talmid Chacham who loves each mitzvah so much. I hope I can make Hashem, Abba, and all of Klal Yisrael proud of me.
Before my family moved to North Miami Beach, we lived in the greatest out-of-town community, Kew Gardens, New York. For those of you that don't know Kew Gardens, it's the best out-of-town community. The Sharfman and Kamen families had the special schus for decades to be very close with the Krohn family. It is our great kavod tonight to have Rabbi Pesach Krohn in the audience, and we'd like to ask and call up Rabbi Pesach Krohn. It's true, no?
It's true, you're not kidding, it's true.
Let me just make one announcement. For anybody that needs a drink, there's water in the lobby for the men, by the women, and please help yourselves.
It is so bittersweet for me to be here tonight. I can't thank enough somebody that I've considered a daughter for so many years, and that's Shifra Sharfman. Shifra came to our home, and she lived in our home for 2 years when she went to high school in New York. My wife and I and all my children loved her so much. She was considered part of the family. Not only she lived there, but Dina also lived there for a year. And after Shifra went to seminary in Eretz Yisrael, she came back and she lived by my mother. I'll never, ever forget the first time that I met Dovi. It was on my mother's porch, and Shifra had called me and said that she was going with this wonderful fellow. She would like me to meet him. And I was thinking, who in the world is going to be Zoicha to marry this girl who was perfection herself? And I come, and they're both sitting on 2 chairs on the porch, and Dovi's long legs are as tall as Shifra. And I put out my hand, and he gives me the warmest smile. And he was so friendly and so nice and so special. And I went home and I told my wife, boy, Baruch Hashem, she's going to marry a great guy. And of course, we all know what kind of marriage they had, the greatest marriage you could imagine. And the reason that my wife and I were so happy, I know you're not going to believe this, but Sarah Kamen and my wife went to seminary together 600 years ago in Israel. And it's so amazing that now, almost every night, Sarah Kamen and my wife work on the Chevra Kadisha in Queens. There is no one in Queens that works harder than Sarah Kamen every night, going out to places that I don't even allow my wife to go. I mean, I tell her there's no end. You know, you could go to Queens, but you don't have to go to Great Neck, you don't have to go to Suffolk County. She says, yeah, but Sarah's going. So Sarah's a role model for what a dedication to a Chesed Shalemus is all about. And everybody in Chavetz Chaim knows that Moshe Kamen is my right-hand man. I do the bris and he does the bottle every time. He's always giving the baby the bottle. He's right up there. And he is so wise and he's so clever. And he knows what's a difficult bris and what's not a difficult bris, but he's smart enough not to say anything until afterwards, and he pulls me to the side. He said, that was difficult, right? And of course he knows, and I'm not going to go describe it up here. But I know him also many, many years. I have cousins, twin cousins, Pesach and David Ackerman, and they were very friendly with Moshe Kamen back when Chavetz Chaim was in Forest Hills. So you would think that that's enough of a connection. But but there's another connection. When I grew up, there was no art scroll. So what if you wanted Pshat and a Rashi? So there was a blue set of Chumoshin that most of you may not realize, because today Art Scroll and Feldheim have taken over, but Rabbi Benjamin Sharfman wrote a classic set of Chumashim with a Perish Rashi. He did it together with his brother-in-law, Rabbi Sheps, and Mr. Rosenzweig helped sponsor it. And anybody who had a difficulty with a Rashi, that's where they learned it from that blue set. We all remember that 5-volume blue set of Chumashim. But you know, I had the schus to meet Rabbi Benjamin Sharfman many times. And I was told, I didn't realize, that Dovi was a Yosem at 11 years old. Imagine, he lost his beloved mother at 11 years old. And he was so close to his father, he would sit up front in the shul, right next to his father. He once said that's how he learned Yiddish. Of course, many of the older Balabatim in the shuls in those days came from Europe. They spoke only Yiddish, so Rabbi Benjamin Sharfman spoke Yiddish, and that's where Dovi learned Yiddish. But there were two other things that Dovi learned from his father. One was how to deal with all kinds of people, the most edela people, the most edela way of dealing with people even who are difficult. Balabatim can be difficult, we all understand, and Rabbi Benjamin Sharfman was a classic American rabbi, and yet somehow he was able to deal even with the European mentality, with edelkeit and refined midas, and that's where Dovi got it from. But there was another thing. I've listened for the last year, and certainly when I knew that I was coming here, to some of the shiurim that Rabbi Dovi gave. Such clarity and such a broad scope. You have to listen to his shir on Hanukkah. Like somebody said before, it's true. Somebody can ask him, well, you're a history major. And, you know, he was talking all about Greek democracy and all the Greek philosophers. You know, you would think the guy was a college guy, like a college graduate. It's amazing. And he puts it all in together. Where did he get that clarity from? Where did he get that idea, how to present an idea so that everybody could understand it? He got it from his father. His father should be well. We can only understand how difficult it must be for that Talmud Chacham to know that he lost such a precious child. Maybe she should help that he should have Arichas Yomim V'Shonim, and he should be able to be comforted. Of course, I mentioned Dina. Dina today is a Heilige Rebbetzin in Cherry Hill. And then, of course, the one, I just love him so much, Aaron Kamen. I got to tell you about Aaron Kamen. I just want to show you what kind of people these guys are. The week before the Maggid Speaks came out, now that goes back to 1985, Aaron Kamen, he wasn't married yet to Faggy Harris, and he was in my house for Shabbos. Rachel, right? Rachel, sorry. Faggy's Minkowitz. So he takes the manuscript, he starts it Friday night, and by Shalosh Shudas he finished it. Now, I worked 2.5 years on that book. And Aaron comes over to me by Shalosh Shudas, he said, Rabbi Krohn, I finished it. It's wonderful. I said, Aaron, you're killing me. I worked 2.5 years on this book, and you knocked it off in less than 24 hours? Now, he was a bocher. I doubt that he was 19 years old then. And listen to what he said. Every time I see him, I still tell him the idud and the chizuk that he gave me. He said, Rabbi Krohn, right? He's pointing his finger to me, right? 19-year-old kid. He says, Rabbi Krohn, I want you to know, this book is so wonderful that if you count up, eventually, the hours that people will spend reading that book, that'll be much more than the amount of time you spent writing it. 19 years old, he was right. But it was amazing. So my being here tonight is sweet because I love the Kamens and I love the Sharfmans and our connection goes back. But of course it's bitter because we lost such a great person. And so tonight we've come for two reasons. We've come, one, to commemorate the great life of Rabbi Dovid Sharfman, but we've come for another thing, to figure out how do we go on in life. How do the Sharfmans go on? How do the Kamens go on? How do all family members, and how does anyone go on when such a shreklach thing happens? What are the tools that we need in order to go on? So let's deal first with the first aspect, commemorating his life. when Rav Aaron Kotler had to give a hesped on his father-in-law, Rabbi Zalman Meltzer, he quoted a Gemara in Brachas, and he teached it in a very unusual way. The Gemara in Brachas, the Avov and Beis tells us, Agra de Hespeda deluye. The reward that someone gets for giving a hesped is when he makes people cry. A person comes to a hesped, it's a very sad thing, and you want to be ma'orer people. Rashi says, Lahorim koil v'agmas nefesh b'loshen nehi v'agmas nefesh sheyivku hashemim. You're supposed to say things that are going to make people cry. That's what a hesped is all about. But Rabbi Aaron said the word deluye, agra despeya deluye means to be doile umashke, to draw from. The reward of a hesped is not only to make people cry, but to draw from this person's life and to see how we can change and how we can grow. And if we think about Dovi, the first thing everybody thinks, his sweetness, his pleasantness, his smile, his warmth, his genuine concern, which, as we said, he got from his father. That sweetness, that kindness, that patience. You know, I was speaking to a number of the Chevra and Chavetz Chaim who grew up with Dovi. And Rabbi Yossi Singer told me something that was mentioned before, that there were times in Tiferes Yisrael, where Dovi taught before he came here, that there were boys that really should have been thrown out. But he advocated for them. And he advocated for kids when everybody said, this kid really doesn't belong in the yeshiva. And not only that, Shifra told me, because when I told her what Rabbi Singer said, she said, you know what? There were times when he couldn't win, when they had to get rid of him. But then Rabbi Sharfman would make sure that he took him to another yeshiva and that he found a Rebbe for him and he found a tutor for him. And some of these boys are wonderful, growing Talmidei Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael today. That's what he was all about. And that's the first lesson that we have to learn. Today, I spoke in the high school, Rabbi Brigida's high school. I was so impressed with these kids. It was amazing. Should be so proud of all the children that go there. And I told them something which I believe, because this past Shabbos, I spent the whole Shabbos with the Chavetz Chaim group from WITS. All the alumni came together in Stamford, Connecticut, and I'm telling you, you should do it in Miami. And I said to the boys, you will see, if you write down the names of all of you here today, in 20 years from now, many of you will be Mabritzei Torah, you'll be Rosh Hashivas, you'll be Rabbanan, you'll be in Kashrus, because the Chavetz Chaim, you feel an achrayus for Klal Yisrael. In Chavetz Chaim, you feel that you're part, a cog in the big wheel that's Klal Yisrael. And one of the things that I told them is that every morning we say about Hashem, we give Hashem a big compliment in the Hallelujah. We say, Haroifei l'shvurei leiv. Hashem is the one who heals the brokenhearted. And I want to tell every one of you what I said to them. Every one of us should have our own siddur that we daven and that we can underline certain expressions that mean something to us, and then your siddur is talking to you every day. You come to a big yeshiva, you come to a shul, you take a siddur off the shelf, you're davening 80 miles an hour, so sometimes you think of what you're saying, sometimes you don't. But if you have your own siddur and you underline it, then that siddur is talking to you. There's a message there every day. And I told the boys, this is what Rabbi Sharfman was all about. Think for a second, what are the first three letters of those words? Haroifei l'shvurei leiv. Hey, lamed, lamed. Hallel. That's the biggest praise we could say on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He heals the brokenhearted, even in this Beis Medrash tonight. And for the thousands of people that are watching tonight and streaming, there's so many people that are depressed today. There's so many people that have such finster tzaras. Terrible. Children, family, health, finances, shidduchim, kids at risk. There's no end. And people are broken, so who's going to help them? That's what Dovi had the heart for. He was the roifei l'shvurei leiv. And that's the lesson that we have to learn. And tonight, before you go to sleep, take out your siddur and underline it in the Hallelujah. So when you see it tomorrow, you'll know that that's the role of a heilig yid, to be a roifei l'shvurei leiv. Now the truth is that I can feel personally the pain of the Caymans, because I'm the oldest of 7 children in my family, and my father died when I was 21. My mother, unfortunately, was the quintessential almana. She was an almana for 40 years. She never got over the passing of my father. I walked down all my brothers and sisters to their chuppah together with my mother. So I understand the pain because I'm the oldest of 21. So I saw what it means that my brothers and sisters, 18, 17, 16, down to 12, never had no father. So when a person becomes a yasam, two things can happen. One, a person could become so bitter and so angry and so resentful, and it affects them for years. How could Hashem do this? Why did Hashem do this? Now I'm left alone. I have no guiding post like I had all these years. That's one reaction, and it's chas v'shalom. No one should ever criticize somebody that has that reaction because nobody knows what it is to be in that place until a person is in that place. And the second thing is that a person could become just the opposite. A person feels the pain, and he understands that he has to be compassionate. He has to be caring. He has to be concerned. He has to be validating. And Dovid Sharfman lost his mother at 11 years old and walked with his father alone and came home to a Shabbos table without a mother. He became that second type of person. He understood that people are in pain and you have to be compassionate and you have to be caring. And that's why you have to underline that expression, because we each in our community, each in our family, we know broken people, and that's the lesson that we have to learn. Today I was sitting with Shifra and I told her this story, and I think it's so important. This Sfas Emes died at 58 years old. The Sfas Emes was the second of the Ger Rebbes. At his Levaya, two of his sons were talking, and one said to the other, well, at least our father had Arichas Yomim. So the other brother said, Arichas Yomim? What do you mean, he had longevity? He only lived to be 58. He said, I didn't say that he had Arichas Shonim. I said that he had Arichas Yomim. Arichas Shonim means length of years. Nobody knows what tomorrow brings. No Rav, no doctor, no one can guarantee for you Arichas Shonim. But every single one of us can guarantee for ourselves Arichas Yomim, making every day count. And that's what Dovid did. Every day he was able to go to sleep and say, today I did something for a Talmud. Today I did something special in my family. Today I did something special for Klal Yisrael. Just like his father did, he wrote Svarim, Mit Hashem, these Shiurim, these Shmuzin. Eventually they should be printed. Because it's a help for Klal Yisrael. It has a hekif in covering a topic. But I'll tell you something very interesting. The last number of years, I had the great zchus to become very friendly with Rebbetzin Youngreis, Allah Shalom. Many of you heard of her. Many of you, the women certainly heard her speak. She had the Hineni organization. And she once told me, she wrote this in a book afterwards, Life is a Test. She was very close to her husband, Rav Meshulam from North Woodmere. And she was so broken when he passed away. They had such a good marriage. She always quoted him. And she told me that she could not even look at his svarim because his handwriting was there with the comments on the side. And every time she saw his handwriting, she felt him dying all over again. And one night, her daughter found an index card in one of the svarim. And her daughter said, Ma, please come, read this, which Abba wrote. And when she read it, she felt that it was a message that her husband was giving her how she could continue with life. Listen to what he wrote, and then you'll see what she added to that. He wrote, hoping, surely, that she would see it one day. A long life is not good enough, but a good life is long enough. And when I think about my father who died at 47, this is something that gives me nichum. He didn't have Arichas Shonim, but every day counted. And when we look back at somebody who passes away relatively young, and 55 is certainly today relatively young, but we look back and we say that a good life is long enough because it's a role model. And then the Rebbetzin added these words: the goodness cannot be measured by the length of our years, but how we live those years. The goodness is not about what we amass, but what we give. It's not about having more, but being more. For in the end, our lives are judged not by the businesses or the houses or the portfolios we built, but by the lives we touched and made better. Shifra was showing me you could cry some emails from Talmidim of 10 and 20 years ago, how they still remember Rabbi Dovid Sharfman, Zeichet Tzadik B'Kodesh L'Vrocha, because he had such an effect. That's what life is all about. And when we think about that person, and we feel how lucky we were to know a person like that, and to make him a role model, and to think about him, and to understand that which he stood for, about helping another Yid. But now we go to the second part. How do we continue? How does a person go through life after such a terrible, terrible tragedy? And I believe that the answer is emunah. And I'll tell you something very interesting. This past summer, I had the zchus to be in the Ukraine. And there I met a person, an extraordinary person who mamish turned the world over on its head in publications and in ashkofa. And his name is Rab Shalom Arush. Rab Shalom Arush wrote a book. You can't really call it a book. It's called The Garden of Emunah. This has sold in so many languages, over 1 million copies. It should be like the Maggid books. I mean, the Maggid books should be like this. Over 1 million copies. And I want to tell you, when I met him in the Ukraine, he was in Uman for Shabbos on a quiet vacation, and one of the greatest Yidden I've ever met in my life, Rav Mata Frank, introduced me to him. I took a walk with him, and then I told him, please come. We have 80 people here that came on a trip. There are people here that have come with me on some of these trips that we take in the summer. And he told us the most amazing thing. Now, if you would see him today, a Breslov, a Chassid, a golden bekeshel, long payas, a wild beard, but so compatible. And he told us that he was a helicopter pilot. He was in the division in the Israeli army. Imagine. Had long flowing hair down to his shoulders, did everything that you could imagine a 23-year-old kid would do, who was not from. And he said one day 6 of his helicopter friends were killed in a crash. And he couldn't believe it. Here he was living the life of Riley. He was having everything that he wanted. And all of a sudden, life is over. And he began thinking, what's the purpose of life? And he started going to different rebbeim, and eventually he came to Breslov. And he felt that he was able to make a connection to Hashem. And if you read this book on emunah, you'll become a different person. Because emunah is the thing that carries us in the most difficult times. And I'll tell you another thing. There's another book now. Also, a young man, Rabbi Dovid Asher, a Sephardic fellow, wrote this book, Living Emunah. They have Living Emunah 2, Living Emunah 3. Also, so inspirational. Carries a person in difficult times. And then the third book that I want to tell you is really amazing. This past summer, I was in Eretz Yisrael. And I met a woman who has gone through Gehenna on this world in a terrible, terrible way. All of us know what happened in Har Nof, that terrible morning when 4 people were killed in the shul. But what many people don't realize that there was a 5th one. Besides the Druzy policeman, there was a younger man, a family man, and Nebuch. He was beaten and he was in a coma for a full year. And I met his wife, Risa Rotman. And, you know, anything that happens, so you hear about it for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Afterwards, everybody forgets about it. And people forgot about her. But for her, the Gehenna was every single day. She went to her husband in the hospital in the coma, trying to give him chizuk, trying to connect to him. And then eventually, Nebuch, after a year, he passed away. And she decided to write about it. And she called me because she wanted to discuss something about the writing of the book and the title. And when I came back, and we worked on a title, but when I came back to America, Rav Gedalia Zlotowitz from ArtScroll told me there's only one title, Terror and Emunah in Har Nof. Again, these are 3 books that people should be reading because that's what helps carry you. So how do we get carried in that way? So Rav Schwab has a very interesting lesson for each and every one of us. And we could all start it with seriousness tonight. The Pasuk tells us that Yosef was punished. He spoke to the Sarah Mashkim, and he said to the Sarah Mashkim, Kim zachartani yitcha, kasher yitav loch. Please remember me to Pare. I want to get out of this place. I want to get out of the prison. And do a chesed. And it'll get me out of this place. What's wrong with that? Everybody's allowed to do a shtadlus, right? You got a problem, you go to somebody who can help you. But you know what you have to say? Rav Schwab said, and that's why he was punished. He should have said, everything that happens, you have to say, Emir Hashem, Be'ezras Hashem, and Hoidul Hashem ki tov ki li'olam chasdei. That has to be on your tongue all the time. You go to have a meeting with the CEO, Be'ezras Hashem, it'll work out. Be'ezras Hashem, I'll say the right thing. I can't tell you how many times I heard Rabbi Shalom Shadran say, B'shem Malchus, Hoidul Hashem ki tov ki li'olam chasdei, when something works out. We have to begin thinking that every single thing that happens to us is only Be'ezras Hashem, Emir Hashem, and Hoidul Hashem ki tov ki li'olam chasdei. And when you do that, then you begin to realize that Hashem is always there. And how do we exist through difficult times? I believe one of the ways is begin telling each other stories of Hashgacha Pratis. I'm going to tell you now 2 or 3 stories. You will see it's impossible that such a thing could happen unless Hashem made it happen. And once you begin telling your children at the Shabbos table these stories of Hashgacha Pratis, and you begin reading them and telling them over, you begin to see Hashem is here. Sometimes we may not understand why it's happening, but we know it's Hashem. It's not just Stam in the Weltaran that things happen. It's not a Hefkeris. I'll tell you a story. It's unbelievable. There's a fellow Shmelki, Brazil. The older people here certainly remember. In New York, he learned the Shar Yoshev. He made a whole group of songs together with Abish Brot, and they called it Regesh. Today he has a yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. And he told me that one of the Bochrim eventually got married and became a traveling salesman. And he spent so much time in the car. But the guy didn't want to just listen to sports shows and talk shows. All the Irish Gate, it's always the same. So he decided he's going to listen only to Torah tapes. And this fellow spoke Yiddish, so he decided he's going to take the tapes to the Kloisenberger Rebbe. So every day he gets into his car, puts on a CD of the Kloisenberger Rebbe who spoke Yiddish, and he's listening day in, every time. As soon as he gets in the car. One day he's driving, all of a sudden he hears a horn right behind him. And he gets so startled, he realized, he fell asleep at the wheel. He's about to crash into a guy who's at a red light. And he slams on the brake, and he doesn't hit the guy. Now, the guy ahead of him didn't think anybody was driving behind him or was going to hit into him, so he just drove off. This guy's shaking. He turns around. There's no car behind him. He turns to the right. There's no car. There's no car. Where was that horn? That's what woke him up. And then it occurred to him. He didn't believe it. He pressed rewind on that CD. And 10 seconds earlier in the CD, 35 years ago, a guy was driving along the street where the Kloisenberger Rebbe was giving a shir in Union City. There happened to be an open window. He blew the horn. I guarantee you nobody even realized that somebody blew the horn. But Hashem orchestrated, because Hashem knew that 35 years later, this guy is going to be driving and he's going to be Mekayim of Lech Chavaderach, and I'm going to save him. So he had this guy blow the horn 35 years ago. It's only Hashem could orchestrate something like that. A guy from Chaverim, everybody knows what Chaverim is, right? They get locked out of the house, you lock a baby in the car, whatever. A guy in Lakewood told me this story. It's unbelievable. I'm just going to tell it to you just so that you should know in general. Besides, till we get to the story. You know which calls they get the most in Lakewood, in Chaverim? You have to be so careful. A mother leaves a child in the back of the car. So now many women in Lakewood, they put their purse in the back of the car. Because they're not going to forget the purse. I mean, the baby maybe, not the purse, right? And some of them put their left shoe, could you believe, in the back seat. Because when they go out, they're not going out without one shoe, right? Oh, my son, I didn't realize. How you doing? Right? So now listen what this guy Chaverim tells me. It's 2 years ago. It's before a 3-day Yontif. And what happens is, it's Erev Shabbos, and so there's going to be Shabbos, and Shabbos night is, Motzei Shabbos is Shavuos, the first night, and then, so Sunday, Monday is Yom Tov. An hour before Shabbos, he gets a call. Could you please come and fix my flat? So the guy says, where are you stuck? Garden State Parkway, Route 9. He said, no, it's in my driveway. He says, in your driveway? You know, it's a 3-day Yom Tov coming up. Everybody's so busy. Why can't you wait till after Yom Tov? He says, I'm on Azkara. I might need the car on Yom Tov. The Chaverim guy told me he felt like a heel. Oy Fei, I'm so sorry. I didn't even think about it. Oy, I'm so sorry. I'm going to come and I'm going to fix your flat myself. And sure enough, he comes and he fixes the flat. And you wouldn't believe this. Motzei Shabbos, they're sitting at the table, right? This guy, Chaverim, who fixed that other guy's flat. He's sitting at the table with his children and his mother-in-law and his father-in-law. They're all sitting at the table. All of a sudden, the mother-in-law falls back into her chair. She's having a stroke. Her eyes are flying into her head. Somebody else, get Hatzalah! And they call Hatzalah. And who do you think comes? This guy who he fixed the flat for. So it turns out that this guy, because he fixed his flat of this guy, saved his mother-in-law's life. And most of the time, that's a good thing. But that's hashgacha. When you hear stories like this, you know that Hashem is there, so that gives us a certain sense of security. Hashem is there with us all the time. I'll tell you one more story. It's unbelievable. Rabbi Palgan spoke about Kew Gardens. It is the greatest neighborhood in the world outside Yerushalayim. There's no question about it. But I'll just tell you this. So this past, I mean, you don't even know from these things of snow. And snow on Purim is like a joke. But we had snow last year, Purim. So the sanitation wasn't collected. It was very difficult to go around and give shalach manas. But anyhow, that night, 2 nights after Purim, actually, Rav Kalman Epstein, who's the Rosh Yeshiva in the local yeshiva in Sha'ar Torah, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Probably he's up learning. He hears the sanitation people. So he runs outside, and he has 3-4 bags, big black bags of garbage, the good husband, and he gives it to this guy, Theodore. So, Theodore takes it, and then as he's about to walk into the house, Theodore calls back, excuse me, sir, are you a rabbi? He said, yeah, I'm a rabbi. He said, can I ask you something? And Kalman Epstein's telling me, he's trying to think, like, what kind of shayla could a garbage man have 2 o'clock in the morning that he needs a rabbi? So he says, yeah, how can I help you? He says, my mother died a few hours ago. And my brother and sister want to have her cremated. Now, we're not religious, but I know she's supposed to have a Jewish burial. How can I guarantee that my mother will have a Jewish burial? I didn't even tell my brother and sister she died yet. So Rav Kalman's a very smart person. He says, I'll tell you what to do. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock in the morning, call a Jewish funeral home. Tell them where the body is. Tell them to get the body. You sign off and arrange the funeral. And then after the funeral is arranged, then you'll go and you'll call them and everything will be fine. That's what the guy does, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He calls Rav Kalman. He says, Rabbi, you're a genius. I called the funeral home. They got the body. Once the funeral was arranged, I called my brother and sister and said, Mom died a couple hours ago. And, we're going to have the funeral. And they're okay with it. Oh, thank you so much, Rabbi. He says, you're welcome. He's about to hang up. He says, wait a second, Rabbi. You're the only rabbi I know. You think you could come and speak at the funeral? So Rav Kalman's a tzaddik. He says, okay, I'll come. I said, what'd you say? Listen to what he said. He said, people reap in death what they sow in life. He said, your brother told me that your mother, though she wasn't religious, she lit candles Friday night, so she made a connection to God. So she would have wanted to have a Jewish burial. And so therefore God orchestrated that I should be there at that time and your brother should ask me the question. And because she felt some sort of a connection to God, God protected her. That's amazing. Fine. He told me he didn't stay for the burial. A couple days later, he went from Lakewood all the way out to Suffolk County, 170 miles to be Menachem. The guy wasn't sitting Shiva, but he had stopped working for that week. But he wanted to make a connection with him, and he didn't. He just wouldn't answer. Then finally, after 2 weeks, he hears the sanitation people again. He runs outside. He says, is Theodore here? They say, who's Theodore? I said, what do you mean, who's Theodore? He was the guy who was here 2 weeks ago after that snowstorm. They said, nah, he never comes here. He works at Suffolk County. We needed overtime. We needed extra people. We came here that night. That's the only time he ever worked in Queens. Imagine that. Hashem orchestrated that this guy came just that night so his mother should be able to have a Jewish burial. So I told over this story in Camp Monk this past summer, and my Rabbi Dovid Cohen was sitting there. Listen how a God will understand something. And after I finished the story, Rabbi Dovid says, "Nu, how do you understand the story?" I said, "What do you mean, Hashgacha Pratis? The guy never comes, and he came just that night, and like this, his mother was able to get a Jewish burial." Rabbi Dovid said it's much deeper than that. He said, how did his mother make a connection to Hashem? She lit the candles. She used fire to make a connection to Hashem. So Hashem protected her from being burned by fire. That's an Adam Gadol who sees that story and understands the depth of what it's all about. But the point is, Hashgacha Pratis. And if we want to go on in life after difficult times, and we know that Hashem is there, and sometimes we wonder, are we allowed to ask questions? Are we allowed to ask questions? And the answer is a resounding yes. You know, I'm going to tell you now a Gemara that you would not believe. I would never have the courage to say this Gemara, except I'll give you the source. You could look it up. In Bava Basra, Tezayin Amud Beis. Eov had terrible problems. Omar Eov, Rabbeinu Shalom, Shema Ruach Sa'ara Avra Lefanecha. Maybe a whirlwind got over you and you got mixed up between Eov and Oyev. My name is Eov, not Oyev. I'm not your enemy. Why'd you do all this? And the Gemara is telling us that he asked this question. And what does Hashem answer him? Hashem tells him, Eifa Yisa b'yasti aretz. Where were you when I created the world? Hagei, you tell me, Im yadati bina, if you're so smart. In other words, there's a master plan. I can tell you for myself. My father was dying. My brother and I, Rav Kalman, who should have a refuah shlema, he was with me by Rav Schwab for Shabbos, because my father was in a hospital in Washington Heights. And I come after Musaf. We went to the hospital. We come to eat a meal together with Rav Schwab and his Rebbetzin. I'll never forget this. Rav Schwab says to me, how's your father? I said to him, I have betochen that he'll be okay. And Rav Schwab got so serious. And he said, betochen does not mean that your father's going to be well. Betochen means that Hashem has a master plan, and hopefully one day you'll be able to understand it. And that's something that we have to know. That's what Hashem said to Eov. I once heard a pshat. It is so amazing. The way the Chavetz Chaim learns this pshat is just incredible. We say in Ashrei, Shemer Hashem eskol yavov v'eskol harishayim yashmid. Hashem protects all who he loves and all who he hates, yashmid. He gets rid of. So Rabbi Zev Leff, who used to be down here in Miami, he once said this over in the name of the Chavetz Chaim. Imagine a guy comes late to shul. So this is what he hears. Eskol yavov v'eskol harishayim yashmid. All who he loves and all the Rishayim he's wiping out. Hey God, what are you doing? Excuse me, sir, you walked in late. You walk in 20 minutes late to the shir. You can't ask a question. And what about a guy who dies early? Or what about somebody who leaves a shir early? What does he hear if he leaves shul early? Shemer Hashem eskol yavov v'eskol harishayim. Hashem watches all who he loves and all the... Hashem, what are you doing? Excuse me, sir. You didn't stay to the end of the show. And that's what we have to know. There are some things we understand. Sometimes a person doesn't get a job. And he's so broken. He's been waiting 2 years to get a job. He's out of work. And then finally, 2 weeks later, he hears that that company went bankrupt and he's able to get a better job. But if he would have got that job that he wanted, he'd be back in the hole again. So sometimes we understand. Sometimes, as somebody just spoke to me before, a girl doesn't get accepted in the seminary and she thinks that's the end of the world. How's she going to find the shidduch? She didn't get accepted in that seminary. But what happened? She went to another seminary. And she married her best friend's brother. That's why Hashem made it. She didn't get involved in the first seminary. So sometimes we understand it. But sometimes we don't. You think I understand why my father had to pass away at 47? Hashem's created the world. And at the end of time, we'll understand. But that's what Hashem is saying. There are certain things we'll never be able to understand. And that's why we come together. That's the purpose of an evening like this. to give chizuk to the Kamens, to give chizuk to the Sharfmans, to give chizuk to ourselves, that there's a Rabbeinu Shalom in the world, and we have betochen, and we have emunah, and we understand that we can't understand everything. And if we get together in kinusim like this, and we give chizuk to each other, that's the way that people can exist and continue. I just want to tell you one more thing, and we'll review quickly and then end with a great, great thought that applied to Dovi and should apply to all of us. Rab Chaim Volozhiner had a Talmud. His name was Rav Berdecki. And this Rav Berdecki lived in a place where there were many communists and many despots, and people were trying to run away from that country. And every night they would take people on a boat, and everybody knew that one night this boat is going to fall. This boat is going to crack up. And Rahman al-Itzlan, this Rav was on with two sons, an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and the boat started cracking up. And they just had a quarter of a mile to go to shore. Every night he had taken so many people. The boat could hold 20, 30 people. He took 70. So they knew it was going to happen one night, and it happened that night. And there's such panic because there's not enough rafts for everyone. And the father now is talking to his children. And he says, my children, there's no way that I can swim holding both of you. There's no point in the three of us dying. We all have to make a decision. I have to make a decision. I have to drop one of you. I can't swim holding both of you. I don't know what to do. It's the worst moment of my life. And the older boy says, Tati, hold the younger boy. Maybe I could swim. I think I know how to swim. So maybe I'll swim along you and we'll be able to be saved. And then the younger boy says, no, Tati, save the older boy. He learns Torah. He's a tzaddik. Save him. Because after all, he's the bigger tzaddik than me. And the father doesn't know what to do, and he decides that he's going to drop the older boy. And the second that he leaves go of the older boy, and the older boy realizes that he's falling into the water, he yells, Tati, please, please, hold on to me, don't drop me. And the father cannot drop him. He can't, no matter what, he can't drop him. And he holds both kids, and somehow he struggles, and somehow he's able to go and make it to the shore. And he throws both kids on the sand, and he collapses himself. And finally, when he gets up, the older boy says to him, Tati, how could I thank you? You saved my life. And the father says to him, I didn't save your life. You saved your own life. When you cried out to me, you gave me a strength that I did not know that I had. I did not think that I could swim holding two kids. But when you cried out, you gave me that strength. And so you saved your own life. And a certain Rebbe who told over this Gemara touched it in such a beautiful way. The Gemara tells us, Im roya odam shehispalel. If a person sees that he davened v'loy nena and he didn't get answered, what should he do? Yahrzeit v'yispalel. You should daven again. Shenemar kavei al Hashem chazak v'yamitz libecha v'kavei al Hashem. A second time. And that's the third way tonight that we should have strength. Never give up on davening. Never, never. You think it's the end. You think it's impossible. Why? Because sometimes Hashem doesn't have the strength to save us. Why? Because we don't have enough schusim. So we have to daven again. So the way we continue is making sure that we have hamunah, understanding there's hashgacha pratis, understanding that we don't live long enough to know the whole world history from beginning to end, and knowing that betochen means that Hashem has a plan. And eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to understand that plan. And to keep a community together. To give chizuk to each other. And to try to do things, l'zeicha nishmas, that person. And to try to follow in his ways so it should be a schus for his neshama. I just want to end with this magnificent, magnificent thought. If you open up the Mishnah Brura, literally to the last page of the Mishnah Brura, you will see something so amazing. A question about the month of Adar. Not this year, because this year we have only one Adar. But what happens? What do you do on Yud Daled Adar Aleph? Should you make a party? Should you say Tachnun? Because after all, it's Yud Daled Adar, and that's when Purim was. So when there are 2 months, we always make Purim the second month. So what do you do the first month? So if you take a look, you'll see that the Ramah, the last words in the Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim, he writes, Mikol Mokum Yarbek Tzas Besuda. Add to the Suda. Some people say you should make a party Yud Daled Adar Aleph. Of course, we don't say Tachnun. And then listen to the pasuk that he ends with. V'toiv leiv mishta tamid. Toiv leiv, somebody's got a good heart, life's a party. So, you can make a party? Make a party. Why not? Yud Daled Adar. Fine. Now watch what the Shari Tshuva says. You could go crazy. The Shari Tshuva says, what did the Ramah end Shulchan Aruch with? Toiv leiv mishta tamid. Take a look at the first page in Shulchan Aruch. The first page of Mishnah Berurah after the Beis Yosef gives you the introduction. What does it say? What's the first words of the Ramah? Shivisi Hashem lenegdi sabed. He used Tamid at the end of Shulchan Aruch, and he uses Tamid at the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch. Zok the Shari Tshuva in his genius way. That's the pshat when we say in Yontif Davening, we have to have the Shnei Semidim Kehel Chasan. Both Tomids, the Shivisi Hashem L'Negdi Samid and the Toiv Leiv Mishta Tomid. When you walked into the Sharfman house, that's what you saw. Ehrlichkeit, Frumkeit, Obgehiten Kalocha, no question, Shivisi Hashem L'Negdi Samid. But you walked into the Sharfman home, it was always happy, always Freilach, always Besimcha, Toiv Leiv Mishta Tomid. That's the lesson that we have to learn from Duvi and Yabal L'Chaim Shifra. To have that great combination. And I know that I'm on tape and I'm being streamed all over, but I tell you, Chavetz Chaim has that more than any other place. Chavetz Chaim guys are happy. Chavetz Chaim guys live life with friendship and positive attitudes. And when you're positive, then you're going to build Vancouver and Las Vegas and Cherry Hill and Milwaukee and Vancouver and Cleveland and Louisville and Brooklyn and Miami, Milwaukee. How does that happen? You know why? Because the Rosh Hashivas, whether it was Rab Henach or whether it was Rab Dovid or was the Alta von Slobodka, the Chavetz Chaim, they had that combination. And that's what Duvi had. Shivisi Hashem L'Negdi Samid and Toiv Leiv Mishta Tamid. They should help that each and every one of us should look as Rabbi Dovid Sharfman, Zeichat Tzaddik v'Kodesh Avrocha, as a role model, what life is all about. It's true. He didn't have Arichas Shonim, but he certainly had Arichas Yomim. And we can all be his Talmidim. And if we learn that lesson of Toiv Leiv Mishta Tamid, and Shivisi Hashem L'Negdi Samid, hopefully we'll be Zoicha to Mashiach and Tchias HaMeisim and be reunited with all those who we love and held so dear. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening.
I'd like to call up Rabbi Kamen now for Kalmale, then we'll go right into Marav. I didn't either. We're having more of these. Many years.
Yeah, amen. This is it, right? El Molei Rachamim, Shochein Bamaromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nachona, Al Kanfei HaShechina, B'malos Kadoshim Utahorim, Kizor L'Hakia Mazirim, and Es Nishmas Harav Baruch Dovid Aryeh, Ben Harav Nosan Dov, Sheholach L'Olamo, Bavur Shanachnu Mispalim V'nod Min Tzedakah Bar Azkaras Nishmaso, B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchaso, L'chein Bal Harachamim Yastirehu, B'seiser kanovov le'olamim. V'yitzra b'tzra chayim es nishmaso. Adonai hu nachalaso. V'yanuach b'shalom mishkavo v'nomar amen.